Thank you everyone for joining me here today to listen to this talk. And thank you for the great introduction, Tina. As she said, my name is Brayden Nilson, and I work with Environment Climate Change Canada, and I will be talking about AQmap, which is a tool that I've been developing for nearly the past decade now, and how you can use it to make cleaner air decisions during wildfire smoke events, and how we've been using it and other tools at our disposal to improve access to critical health information during wildfire smoke events. Many people have been involved in this work, so I especially want to thank the colleagues at Environment Climate Change Canada that are listed on the slide there, as well as our partners at the University of Northern British Columbia, Dr. Peter Jackson specifically, and the always patient IT services. And this has been a multitude of projects and interactions with partners and pilot projects and things that have developed along the ways. So there's too many partners that we've worked with to list here, a multitude of levels of government and different communities and health authorities. I wouldn't be here presenting if it wasn't for all the people that supported this work. So I very much appreciate everyone's contributions so far. And so the annual area burned by wildfires in Canada is increasing. And we can see that in this plot from the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, the CIFFC, which shows the annual area burned each year, at least what was reported to be burned since 1983. And we can see from this that for the first period up until about 2010, the normal was 1 to 2 million hectares of land being burned, with the occasional 4 to 7 million hectares for like a bad wildfire year. Since 2010, that normal has shifted. Now we're looking in the kind of 2 million to 4 million hectare range for a normal year. And as many of you will be aware, 2023 was a record wildfire year for Canada, and not in a good way. 17 million hectares burned across the country, which is the equivalent of a third of Nova Scotia's land, or about 3 Prince Edward Islands. So a very large amount of land burned in that year. And so far this year, as of yesterday, nearly all the area burned in 2024 has already burned in Canada. So we're already setting up for another abnormal wildfire year, but maybe this is just the new normal. And this raises the risk of harmful smoke exposure for Canadians, because the more area that is burned, the more potential for smoke to be released, and the more potential for that smoke to mix down to the surface and be breathed in by Canadian people. And exposure to wildfire smoke is associated with an increase in the risk of death and a range of health conditions. This is summarized pretty well by my colleagues at Health Canada, in their 2024 report on the human health effects of wildfire smoke. There's a link there at the bottom of the slide. And I want to draw attention specifically to their conclusion and considerations paragraph, which summarizes what most of the literature points to are the main kind of health impacts of wildfire smoke. And there's mention of increased risk of premature mortality and adverse respiratory effects, as well as increased risk of cardiovascular mortality and morbidity. And these are very well supported in the literature. There's strong evidence that these are a result of wildfire smoke. And there's lesser strong evidence, but still evidence present for the effects to reproductive and developmental effects, neurological effects, cancer, and skin and eye conditions. And wildfire smoke is not just one air pollutant. It's a mixture of gases and suspended particles, of which fine particulate matter, which is a subset of suspended particles, either solid or liquid, is otherwise known as PM2.5, is the primary health burden of wildfire smoke. And it has the highest health burden of Canada's key air pollutants. So we see this nice diagram created by Jen Burgos for the BC CDC, showing just how small these PM2.5 particles are to scale. And fine particulate matter, or PM2.5, is small enough to enter the lower respiratory tract and pass into the blood, leading to the myriad of diseases and health risks that was alluded to on the previous slide in that report. This is also summarized fairly well in a 2021 report for health impacts from air pollution in general, not just from wildfires in Canada. This report by Health Canada. And it notes chronic exposure to PM 2.5 air pollution contributed to 8% of all-cause non-accidental mortality among Canadians over 25 years of age, which is a significant amount of potentially preventable deaths attributed to this inequality, or poor inequality. The economic costs of these estimated 15,000 premature deaths associated with air pollution in Canada is estimated around $110 billion per year in 2016 dollars. So it's a serious economic burden and health burden on Canadians. And if we look at, because this report is looking at air pollution in general for Canada, it splits it down into the main kind of three air pollutants, NO2, which is nitrogen dioxide, ozone, and PM 2.5. And of those three shown in this table, PM 2.5 accounted for 2/3 of the premature mortality estimates. So it does carry the highest health burden of the pollutants, and it's the main one we're concerned about in wildfire stand. And unlike typical air pollution, which is concentrated in urban areas for the most part, think vehicle emissions or industrial, like large industrial sites, they tend to be where more people are. But wildfire smoke can impact communities across the country. So we see this map here I put together of the highest observed PM 2.5 concentration from any monitor, either NAPS or PurpleAir, which I'll talk about later, that was located in one of these polygons across Canada for the period of April to the end of October in 2023, which is basically the wildfire season. So essentially what you're seeing is the smokiest hour observed in various areas across Canada for the 2023 wildfire year. Any of the oranges or yellow are concentrations above 100 micrograms per cubic meter were observed. This is very uncommon in Canada at this high of a concentration, and especially this time of year, unless you're being impacted by wildfire smoke. So it's a pretty safe bet that at some point the orange and yellow regions had wildfire smoke impacting them. But the blue and pink purple regions could still have mild and moderate smoke impacts. They just might have only been partially captured or not captured at all by the observations that were available or not available in that region. And then you can see there's many regions that just we don't have data for, but it's pretty safe to assume that in 2023, the smoke impacted the majority of Canada. Just from the dispersion that we saw in the areas that we do have data, it very likely spread into the areas that we don't have data. So regardless of your border or what sources you have nearby you or your local government's decisions, wildfire smoke can impact you beyond your control. And it's important to be able to quickly understand where and when smoke is present at the surface in real time. In this very sad example from the 2023 wildfire season in July, a young boy named Carl Vi, 9 years old, passed away in 100 Mile House, a community in the interior of British Columbia, due to an asthma attack triggered by poor air quality. The nearest air quality monitoring station was 100 kilometers away. It was not available to provide the reactionary enough reactionary response to this event. Local BC Long states that local real-time air quality monitoring would likely have saved his life. From this event, BC Long has started Carter's project and is working to get more monitors out to these communities that don't have data to prevent this from happening. If you want to look into that, do a search for Carter's project. There's a link at the bottom of the page, or you can go onto the BC Long Foundation. But it really underscores the importance of getting data to the people who can make decisions when they need to so they can survive. Traditional air quality monitoring in Canada is managed by each province and territory and combined in part through the NAPS program, the National Air Pollution Surveillance Program, which is a part of Environment Climate Change Canada. So we see an example of one of those NAPS or regulatory monitors here on the screen. This is in Pemberton. These monitors provide really good data. It's the best data we have available for real-time air quality, but they're fairly large. That's the size of a person, but bigger than a person. They're costly. They require regular maintenance from a technician. So there's some limitations to these monitors. And I should note that I will refer to these by a few names in this presentation. NAPS is referring to the governing body. FEM or FEM is the scientific name of the style of the grouping or classification of instrument. They're also referred to as regulatory or traditional or agency monitors. I'll try to stick to NAPS in this presentation, but just know if I use those words, I'm referring to these good quality data expensive monitors. But as a result of the cost of these monitors, both to purchase and install, but also to maintain, it largely limits them to fairly urban cities where they can be accessed. So you can see this map here I made of the locations of NAPS monitors that should have PM 2.5 data. And you can see large areas of land where there'd be communities that are hundreds to thousands of kilometers away from the nearest monitor. That's where low-cost monitors, LCMs, you may have heard of PurpleAir or AQmap, are a cost-effective way to improve access to PM 2.5 observations. So we see an example of the PurpleAir on the left. The one turned on its side is showing off the two internal sensors inside. Each of those blue boxes is sensor A and sensor B. They're used for error checking to make sure that you can have relative trust within the measurements that are being provided by less reliable sensor than the NAPS monitors are. And they're really easy to install. You basically just need a host that's willing to provide power and Wi-Fi, and it'll start recording and transmitting data and appear on our various tools. And we're already seeing their usefulness across Canada. Here's a quick example showing from August 1st, 2023, a smoke event hitting northwestern Canada. There's some cities, just to give some context of where we're looking at, just kind of the northwestern provinces and territories. The colored background here is modeled smoke from one of Environment Climate Change Canada's models. Models aren't perfect, so it's not a guarantee smoke is there, but it gives an idea of the area of impacts during this event. And then the circles and diamonds are observation points from various monitoring networks, either the NAPS network, the PurpleAir network, and then there's some AQAs that you can't really see on the screen here, but it's another low-cost monitor. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that in this circled area where you can see quite a bit of modeled smoke impacts that are likely impacting the people within large area of land here. This is hundreds of thousands of kilometers in square area. We don't have any observations here without PurpleAir. Those FEM monitors, the diamonds, are on the outside, but all of those circles inside are data that we wouldn't have without these low-cost monitors. So they are already useful. However, inequities still exist in access to nearby PM 2.5 observations. Sorry. I've been doing a preliminary study looking at the Canadian census as well as Canadian communities to determine how many people and how many communities are within an acceptable range that we chose to be 25 kilometers, somewhat arbitrarily, of a PM 2.5 monitor. And this was done for the month of September of 2024, so it's fairly up to date. Each row, the first row is all of Canada, but then each row is an individual province or territory. The left side breaks down population, and the right side is communities. And then the percent showing is the percent that are within 25 kilometers of either a NAPS or PurpleAir monitor. You'll note that some provinces or territories have poorer access than others. If you look at the very first total column, those provinces in the middle, as well as Nunavut at the bottom, don't have the same level of coverage as some of the other provinces do. And this is especially true for rural Canadians. We see, again, those similar provinces. And then overall in Canada, there's less rural coverage than urban. And we also see this for Indigenous communities, many of which are in the boreal forest, which is prone to wildfires, underscoring the importance of needing access to this critical health information. But we see disparities in access to the data. Near the end of last year, about a third of rural Canadians and about almost a half of Indigenous communities were more than 25 kilometers from a monitor. We're already working with partners to equitably improve access to these critical data from wildfire smoke events. So there's a simple map here illustrating this. We have the red area in the background is people or communities that are more than 25 kilometers from either a NAPS or a PurpleAir PM2.5 monitor. Whereas the purple and the green areas are people and communities that have a monitor within a reasonable distance. Purple is the PurpleAir nearby, and gold is a NAPS monitor nearby. So really the red that you can see is the uncovered, the people that don't have access, that are far away from these monitors, that don't have access to this critical information. We've identified approximately 1,000 communities that could be used as potential hosts within these uncovered areas that would help fill all these gaps. But a subset of about 91 of these could potentially be used to bring that kind of that total population coverage within each province and territory, that first column I was showing in the table, up to 90% and reduce the kind of overall population inequities as a starting point for improving access equitably. And then future work could potentially expand that to rural populations and Indigenous communities as well. And while I'm talking about this like it's something that's going to happen, it's already something that's been happening since about 2017 when Dr. Jackson at UNBC first got a PurpleAir, first air pollution course that I was in. And then we started working with Environment Canada and getting these spread and building AQmap, which I'll talk about. But this animation here really shows the whole timeline, month by month, as PurpleAir monitors come online and go offline. The purple circles are any that we haven't purchased at Environment Canada. They could be purchased from a different government agency, anyone else in the public, just not by our group. Whereas the green squares are Air Quality Science Unit, or AQSU PurpleAirs. So those are the ones that our group has bought and mostly been installed by partners. And you can really see the difference here in coverage for now versus at the start of almost a decade ago now in the access to information thanks to this network that has been installed. I won't let this run all the way through, but the slides will be available so you can go back and rewatch the animation if you're so interested. But when it comes to accessing this air quality data, it's often scattered across multiple platforms, which makes it really difficult to interpret, especially when you're trying to look across borders or get like a full picture of what's going on. So for example, you can go to the Federal Environment Climate Change Canada Air Quality Health Index page, and it'll show you not just PM2.5 impacts, but a combination of three main pollutants and major cities and a forecast for that. You can also go to Environment Canada's modeled products, and you can see where their models believe smoke is going to be impacting over various time periods. Depending what province or territory you're in, you can go to individual provinces' sites and check the NAPS monitors within your province. While each of these tools is on its own very great, it becomes difficult when you're comparing between neighboring provinces. As you can see, they're all different formats, different ways of presenting the data, different color schemes, all good on their own, but when you're trying to get the full picture, it makes it difficult because you end up with 30 or 40 tabs open. And I've seen forecasters do this. They're trying to flick through and compare different map projections and line up this smoke plume with these concentrations, and it just becomes really messy. And then you have different languages in there as well. You have different monitoring networks. This is from the PurpleAir monitoring network. So now you have this different data source. It doesn't have the NAPS monitors on it, but those monitors are present across the country. And if you do a Google search for what is my air quality, you're going to get tons of results. It's really not clear what you should choose. I find it overwhelming. And it was a large inspiration behind AQmap, which I'll be talking about for the remainder of the presentation. So I started developing AQmap 2018-ish. It's been getting close to a decade now. And basically, it's an interactive mapping page that integrates and aggregates PM2.5 observations, models, and satellite products in a standardized format in both English and French across Canada, as well as a little bit into the US to give you some idea of what's coming. When you load the page up, you'll see all these markers that you've seen on previous slides that I've shown. These are the current PM2.5 observations from the various monitoring networks we display. The shapes say what type of network it is. So a diamond is a FEM or a regulatory NAPS monitor. These are the good quality, best monitors that we have. The circles and squares are low-cost monitors. PurpleAirs are circles, and the somewhat less common in Canada, AQA is a square. They have the same internal sensors, so their data is fairly comparable. But you can see the large swath of monitors we have across the country. You can also add additional layers in this menu up in the top right. So when you hover over that, you'll see various observations, model and satellite products. And if you click on them, it'll load the data in and it should display. Then if you hover over the various monitors, you can get a quick overview of the past 24 hours of observations. And if you want to drill down onto a specific site, you can click on that monitor, you can view plots, and then you can interact with them. So in this case, you can zoom in for this spike at the end of the event and see at what time it started and drill into it more. In the top left, there's the usual map controls, zooming in and out, full screen, locator. There's also a little search bar. If you happen to know the name of a monitor and you want to go to it specifically, you can type it in there. There's a little help question mark information button down in the bottom left. If you click on that, then you can get more details, some useful links, some contact information. And there's a button to switch between the English and French versions below that. The links for AQmap are at the bottom of the page. There's the English version and the French version, or you can just go to https://aqmap.ca and it'll default you to the English version. And I'll provide a link at the end of the slide as well, if you don't have it already. And thanks to the URL dynamically updating for AQmap, it's easy to bookmark or share your preferred view if you see something interesting or you are always finding that you're turning on the same layers. So if you watch the URL at the top of the animation here, you'll see that the language, the zoom, center, and active layers will update as you pan around the map or as you zoom in. So once you're happy with whatever location you're zoomed onto, you can copy that URL. You can share it with others if you want to, or you can modify your layers. You can add whatever you prefer to look at by default in whatever order of layering you want. You'll see that the URL updates. You can copy that. You can share it. You can bookmark it for later. You can have a few bookmarked and be able to switch between communities easily without having to zoom in and out. And we've also found something useful is if you have like a community page or a specific region that you are responsible for, you could put a little, portal to AQmap on that page that's set up to be zoomed over your community. And then you don't have it showing all of Canada every time, right? Like just when someone goes to the page, they'll see the little snapshot of the data in their community and they don't have to go somewhere else. So that's a really, really handy feature we have. And AQmap has proven to be a key resource during past wildfire seasons. Here we have a plot of the daily unique active users of AQmap since we started tracking back in 2021. And you can see a trend that we have typically more users during May to November, which is roughly when wildfire smoke impacts different regions of Canada. And notably, you can see the impacts, or you can see the increase in users as a result of the unprecedented smoke impacts across Canada in 2023. And even this year, we've already recorded a record number of daily users, nearly triple that of the peak of the 2023 wildfire year. We try to display the best quality data on AQmap, and we do this through an automated QA/QC and bias correction that we've developed for the low-cost monitor observation data. So the example I have here is a PurpleAir from last month, middle of June, that was experiencing some smoke impacts. We can see the time series here. It's looking over about 2 days. And you can see that when my mouse is hovering over that point that's larger, and I get a little info pop up saying that that concentration for that hour was about 55 micrograms per cubic meter. However, note that it's reporting that sensor A agrees with that, but sensor B was reporting a value of 3,000. Values of 3,000 micrograms per cubic meter are very unrealistic in Canada. The highest I've personally seen was 1200, and it's questionable how accurate it is at that range. And that was during the 2023 wildfire year, very bad smoke exposure. So when you start seeing values in 3000, that's a pretty common failure point concentration for PurpleAir monitors for whatever reason. You can expect this further on AQmap. When you click on a PurpleAir, there's a second plot option that lets you compare those two internal sensors. Remember when I showed an image of a PurpleAir earlier on the slide that had two blue boxes inside? Those are sensors A and sensor B. So here we see that AQmap's algorithms have correctly flagged sensor B as reporting much higher than sensor A over this period, up until it got to a value of about 3000, where the majority of its observations are. And it properly filtered this out and is only presenting sensor A on the map. As part of my master's thesis, we developed a bias correction and in part this QAQC as well. And that's published in Atmospheric Measurement Techniques. You can see the DOI at the top left there. You can also search for my last name, 2022, and it'll come up. And I'll have a QR code at the end that you can scan as well. But in this publication, we detail the development and the evaluation of the bias correction. But you can also on AQmap evaluate that in real time. Here's an example of a PurpleAir that's approximately 2 kilometers away from the nearest NAPS monitor. We see the NAPS monitor data on the y-axis, the PurpleAir data on the x. The yellow triangles are raw, so before we apply a bias correction, and the green is after applying our correction. And you can say for this sensor and this time range that our bias correction made it more comparable than not applying the bias correction. So it gave us better, more accurate data for this site. But I'm also working on an improved machine learning-based QAQC and bias correction. I'm hoping to implement that on AQmap within the year 2026. Since we did our original study, we've had more sites in Canada. The last study was based largely on US co-location sites because they were just a bit earlier with the PurpleAir data and had more data available. And we have 4 extra years of observations. So we have a much more robust data set for statistical analysis. And basically what I'm showing on this map here is those co-location sites for the period from September 26 to 2024 where they had data with the current QAQC and bias correction from AQmap applied. Yellow is better data quality, essentially. Green is less good. Blue is worse. Still all fairly good. It doesn't go from 0 to 100, but it just shows that we do see a bit poorer performance in some of these Western sites, which was anecdotally brought to our attention throughout wildfire season since we've been using this on AQmap. In the updated work, which is still very preliminary, we see a much better performance across the board using machine learning, and we expect further improvements as we further refine this system. I'm also aiming to implement an update to AQmap by this fall. It'll largely involve page load times, and this will differ from based on your computer and network, but for my setup, the current version is about 11 seconds on your initial page load, which is way too slow in my opinion. I've got it down to 5.5 seconds so far, and that's still being improved upon. So that's about half the load time, which is a dramatic improvement. And there's a few other features that I won't get into detail here, but essentially it's a focus on improving the user experience, especially on smaller screens, as well as the implementation of this bias correction QAQC method once it's created to improve data frequency and quality. So you can see an example of the current mobile experience. It's very crammed. It's hard to do anything on. This is a screenshot from my phone. And a preliminary version, not a great screenshot. The text is a little bit blurry. Apologies for that. But you can see how, at least so far, it's a lot better to interact with and still being improved upon. In AQmap services a range of audiences due to it being interactive, bilingual, and cross-boundary. We not only have to think about individual users, but we have to think about the national and regional air quality agencies that will rely on this website to determine what regions are being impacted across Canada, where we do or do not have observations, getting kind of the big picture there. We also service air quality forecasters who are trying to figure out situational awareness. Where is the smoke? When was it there? What time did it arrive? When do you think it will go? Where will it likely go? How are the models agreeing with the observations, and how much can we trust what they're saying? Even more local, we go to public health professionals who maybe are managing a few communities. They are interested in how bad is the smoke exposure, or certain areas more or less impacted. And all the way down to the concerned citizen who wants to know, why is it smoky, or should I cancel my sports game today? Or should I not have gone and played sports yesterday? So we really have this continuum from national to local that we're trying to service with one product, and the joys that come with that. We really try to enable access to PM2.5 data regardless of your language, your location, and your background. That is the goal of the product. So imagine if you were a national or regional air quality agency. You load up AQmap and you see this initial view. This is from the beginning of the month. We see impacts potentially spreading from Northwest Territories all the way down to Ontario and Quebec. We see, the blue is typical, so we're starting to see some yellow, oranges, and reds there. You can zoom in on this as well, and it makes it a bit more clear, right? You can start getting a better picture of what areas of each province is likely getting impacted. You can also remove the clutter of the observations and put on the aggregated forecast zone layer, which takes all the monitors within that range and averages them together. And then you'll be able to get a quick idea of which areas are impacted, which areas don't have data but are likely impacted because they're surrounded by impacts, and which areas would be a priority to install monitors in, potentially in preparation for the next smoke event. As an air quality forecaster, like I said, you're looking for situational awareness. So you're going to look at the observations first. You're going to take that as basically confirmation of where smoke is at the surface and to what magnitude. Yellow is less smoky than orange, less smoky than red. You have a lot of yellow nearby, you have more widespread impacts, and try to figure out, based on the observation, what picture we can paint. But you can see that there's lots of gaps within this still. There's areas that are hundreds to thousands of kilometers that are not covered by observations, that smoke could be moving across, that we need to get an idea of where it is. Forecasters do, at least. So you can do this with extra data layers. There's NRCan fire locations and perimeters that could point towards sources of smoke. There's Environment Canada modeled winds, which can show where the smoke that's on the surface may move to. There's model PM2.5 surface concentrations that help estimate the gaps in between the observations. And most of these layers will update as you zoom in or out. You can see them updating there. And then you can drill down further for local impacts to determine timing of events, and so on and so forth, which I'll talk about in the following slides. But you can really see how this lets you build, regardless of what event is happening and to what scale, you can get an idea fairly quickly of what the current situation is and what it might be trending towards, which is very important when you're an air quality forecaster that only has so much time before you have to make the next forecast. As a public health professional, you might be more concerned about a much smaller region than an air quality forecaster. It's maybe a couple of communities, maybe it's just a single community. So you might start with this full scale, or you could zoom in or bookmark that view to save it for later. If you have a NAPS monitor in your region, I recommend clicking on that first to get a overview with the best possible data. Open up the time series, kind of get a feel for what the past few days have looked like. You see an event like we do here, you can click and drag and zoom to it, focus on that event. And then now when you click between different monitors, then that time range will stay static until you refresh the page. And so then you can look at the averages and the frequency of the peaks and the severity and try to determine how bad the impacts were. You can use the colored bands in the background as a bit of a reference for this. Blues are normal, but anything even like the dark blue going to yellows and above, will have, at least yellow and above, will have different health messaging associated with it. If you hover over the legend on the right, you can see that health messaging, and that current message will also be displayed in the pop-up above the plot. Now, as a concerned citizen, you're basically hyper-local at this point. We can pretend that we have a house over here. This is just off the banks of Red River. Luckily, it looks like there's a NAPS FEM monitor. That's the diamonds just to the south, as well as a PurpleAir nearby. This isn't actually my house. This is just a silly example. So if you, in this case, you try to be proactive, you go and you click on the nearby monitor, and oh, you see the past few days have been a bit smoky. Maybe you're not as proactive as you thought. Maybe you're being reactive, and you look at the past few days and you notice that the spike in concentrations around 4 o'clock yesterday, and you happen to have been playing soccer right at that time. And you'd notice that you felt a bit more tired. So maybe you should have checked AQmap earlier to get ahead of this decision, but at least you've learned something from this. You check the PurpleAir in the park. That's luckily right by where you played soccer. Concentrations are a bit lower, so maybe it's not as bad. But oh, suddenly you remember that your mom is in Saskatchewan, and she was saying how it's smoky. And thanks to AQmap, you can go to different provinces. Luckily, somebody has set up a PurpleAir in her area, so she has local data. And it seems to be reading high, so it's a bit concerning. Hopefully her asthma isn't acting up. You can look at the time series and see it's been bad for the past 3 days or 2 days here. And maybe it's time to check in and make sure she listens to advice from our local health professionals. And you could potentially share the link to AQmap so she can keep an eye on it herself. And so hopefully I've underscored the usefulness of AQmap for making real-time decisions during air quality events, as well as how we desire to improve access to this critical information for all people in Canada. We do this largely through data access tools, AQmap, for example, but we also have some internal tools and training that we do with partners and air quality forecasters to kind of keep them as up to speed as they can. And we work a lot with low-cost monitors. We purchase and repair and replace where possible. About a third of the PurpleAirs in Canada at any given time were purchased by our group in Environment Canada. We're also assessing emerging technologies to see if there's something for other pollutants that could work akin to PurpleAirs. As time is available, we're assessing how well they perform. And then we have various outreach and collaboration, such as presentations like this, as well as occasional data sharing for applicable research projects. So hopefully I've inspired you to go and check out AQmap yourself. You can click on the link here. If you have the slides or the PDF, you can also go to https://aqmap.ca to go to the English version. If you have your phone on you, you can take out your camera and you can scan those QR codes to go to either the English or French version. And always feel free to reach out to me, brayden.nilson@ec.gc.ca, if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, or if you just want to chat or collaborate about anything I've talked about today. There's a QR code there for the bias correction publication for the QA/QC and bias correction we use on AQmap at the moment, as well as some links to the Health Canada reports I shared earlier on, the middle one being to the wildfire smoke health effects, and then the bottom right corner being for just general air quality impacts in Canada. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to this, and I would like to turn it over to the group now for questions.